right, hello and welcome. My name is Maya Hollingshed, and I am the branch manager here at the historic John L. Dart Library. Welcome, everybody. Today, I am happy to welcome Vanessa Miller, who will talk about her new book, The American Queen. Vanessa Miller is a best-selling author, playwright, and motivational speaker. She started writing as a child, spending countless hours either reading or writing poetry, short stories, stage plays, and novels. Vanessa's creative endeavors took a new meaning in 1994 when she became a Christian. Since then, her writing has been centered on themes of redemption, often focusing on characters facing multi-dimensional struggles. The American Queen, Vanessa's first historical novel, is based on the true story of Louella Montgomery, a formerly enslaved woman who was appointed queen of the Kingdom of Happy Land. This book is set during America's Reconstruction era and shares the history of a kingdom built as a refuge for the courageous people who dare to dream of a different way of life. Let's welcome Vanessa to Dart.
I don't know if you guys have had a chance to read it or not. You just started? Okay, so this, I say, this is my love letter to history. When I discovered this story, and it was actually because of another author, Lisa Wingate, she had given me an endorsement on one of my books titled Something Good. So I went back to thank her for that, and I was reading a book of hers, and it was titled, and I told her I was enjoying the book, and she told me that a Facebook friend had told her about that particular story because she writes books based on true history. And she said, another Facebook friend told me about the Kingdom of the Happy Land people. And she said, Vanessa, since you live in North Carolina, you might want to research that. And so I started researching it. And I was like, oh my God, I have to write this story. It was something that I lived in North Carolina for like 12 years, but I had never heard of this story. I had never known anything about a kingdom that was built in America. And so my editor, she was just as happy to write this, to edit this story as well, because none of us, and that's the beauty of it, that we were able to uncover hidden history. And so that's what I'm going to read you. I guess I'll just start at the beginning. There's another part that I like to read, and I have to figure out where that is. So I'm going to start at the beginning right now. And then if anybody has any questions. And it's part one, the hard knocks of emancipation. And my voice has gotten so much better. When my tour started, I was like this. And my husband had to bring the microphone so I could actually speak and not have to talk loud. It's been a journey. but my voice is coming back now. It's a lot better. So, with hands planted in the dust of the earth, Louella Bobo's lungs filled with a smothering air of bondage, while she listened to her daddy wax eloquent about freedom. Now listen to me, and listen good. Samuel Bobo stood a few feet away from the cotton field, addressing the enslaved men and women in the Montgomery plantation in Mississippi. Y'all heard what them Yankee soldiers said, as well as I did. Samuel shook a fist. Freedom is coming, but we've got to be ready. Louella's eyes lit up. She'd been on this plantation for all her 24 years, and the happiest day of her life was when those soldiers trotted onto Massa Montgomery's property like they wasn't a bit worried about being shot dead for trespassing. But the news they brung was the same thing Reverend William had been telling them for months. Enslaved people was just too full of fright to fathom the notion that freedom was in reach, as close as their feet were to the ground. Louella wasn't shaken from fear, but wonderment. Would the air of freedom be different, or would it be as stale and unrelenting as slavery air? And so that's where we start in The American Queen. So I like to say Louella was born in slavery, but she was destined to be a queen. She didn't know it, but as slavery ends, she marries Reverend William Montgomery. Her last name is Bobo, which means fool, and so yeah, I didn't know that till I started researching, and I was like, yeah, we'll be happy to get rid of that name, but but because she was on the plantation before William and Robert arrived with the Montgomery, with the owner who became the owner, and the former owner was Bobo. His last name was Bobo, and so that's why her family members on her side, they were named Bobo. Her brother, who appears in the book, his last name was Bobo, and so was her father's last name was Bobo. But when she marries William, they don't actually have a last name at this point because William and Robert did not have a last name until, even though Louella does, some people who were enslaved had last names given to them on the plantation and some did not. So William and his brother Robert, who you will read about in The American Queen, they were sons of the former slave owner. But they did not have that. Now, Robert was born free. He was never a slave. And his skin was so that he could pass as white. So he did pass as white, and he owned slaves himself, about 7. And he had owned a farm before emancipation. So after emancipation, William decides to take the last name of Montgomery. And so that's how they end up, William and Louella Montgomery. And then they leave the Montgomery plantation and set out on a journey because William believes that God has a promised land for them. And so they set out to find this land, and they traveled through Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina to get to their promised land in the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina. They actually owned land that spanned from one part of North Carolina to South Carolina. And as she read earlier, they called it the Happy Land. It was actually the kingdom of the Happy Land because William becomes king of this land and he makes Louella his queen.
So my first question is, you have traditionally written contemporary fiction. Why did you decide to go the historical route?
I never imagined that I would write a historical. I am in the contemporary lane, as you said, was in the contemporary lane. And it was not until Lisa Wingate told me about this story, and then I started researching it, and I knew I had to write this story. And I just caught the historical bug after writing it. And so I just finished my latest one that will come out next year.
Wow.
Well, that one is titled The Filling Station. And it is about the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre.
Oh, wow.
But it's also about the 3 filling station. There was, back in those days, there were not always safe places for black people to stop to refuel their cars. There was a 3 filling station that was on Route 66. It becomes Route 66. It is not that in 1921. But some of the people who were escaping this Tulsa race massacre, they go to the 3 filling station for like a safe haven. And so even though I have a lot of the people that are in the story are, actual people who this thing happened to and lived through it, I chose to use 2 of my main characters as fictional. And so I have them live on the 3 filling station, 3 farm, which they also have a filling station. And so you'll learn about why that is and everything in the story.
Okay. All right. So we already heard, how did you hear about the story about Happy Land? And you said you couldn't get it out your head and you have to write about them.
Absolutely. I had to write about these people because this was something that I never heard of. And there are a lot of people who are reading this, what they keep coming back to, and they keep saying, Vanessa, I never knew this even existed. And I didn't know about it. And so it's, you know, I think people really enjoy the hidden history part of it, that it was something that was right out there in front of people, but people outside of the Hendersonville area didn't know about it. Their land was actually about 20 miles outside of Hendersonville, and there is a street sign, like across the street from where you have to drive to get into the property that once was the Kingdom of the Happy Land. The street sign says Kingdom Drive, because they know in the area what, you know, used to be there, because they actually had the land for about 30 years.
Right. Yeah.
What's there now?
Right now, it is a hemp farm, and he calls it the Happy Land.
Yeah, more than one way to be happy, huh?
But, I mean, he is just an amazing person. What he has done was try to preserve some of the history on the land. He allowed me to come on and walk the land. When the Kingdom of the Happy Land people built their homes, they used this stone for their fireplaces. A lot of it is gone now, but there's one structure left on the land and of the fireplace that was built. And so he drove us over around it, allowed us to see it. He actually built a cabin in honor of the Happy Land people on the property where you could go and see this cabin. And so he's just an amazing person to
Was he so excited you were writing about this?
Well, at first it took for a long time for them to answer me, to even allow me to come on the property, because they were probably like, who is this? What is she talking about? And so later they did call me. I guess once they probably realized, okay, she really does write. They probably looked me up and they said, okay, she does have books. She's not just making this up.
Yeah.
And so then they were like, okay, yeah, because I was going to the area anyway, because I wanted to see the deed. If I'm telling people that they actually own this property, I wanted to see the deed that verified it. And seeing the deed was actually eye-opening too about something else in the 1800s, because, and I want to see if anybody else understands this or even knows why this is. So, Sarepta Davis was the woman who sold them this land. Her husband, John Davis, owned about 900 acres of land. When he passes, he gives her all of his acreage. But after emancipation, they are basically destitute. And she has all these kids, but still no one to, really take care of the land, because all of the enslaved people leave. So once the people from the Happy Land come, she, they're doing things to help her, and she sells them the land. But when I look at the deed, it has Robert Montgomery's name on it and Louella Bobo Montgomery's name on it, but it does not have Sarepta Davis's name on it. It has her daughter, Sarah Goodwin, and Sarah Goodwin's husband, John Goodwin. Now, can anybody tell me why that is, if I'm telling you Sarepta Davis owned the land in the 1800s?
Because she was a widow?
Because in the 1800s, women could not, she could own property, but she could not buy or sell land without her spouse. And so she had to have her daughter and her daughter's husband sell them the land. Mm-hmm. And so when I'm going, because I'm thinking, I'm thinking contemporary mindset. I'm expecting to see Sarepta Davis's name on the deed. Mm-hmm. But when I didn't, it clicked. I was like, oh, you researched that. You knew. And I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, So that's why.
Gotcha. Okay.
We've come a long way.
Yes, yes, we have. Tell us about you visited where the Kingdom of the Happy Land was. Tell us about the other research you did, and I already read some that there was one place that was very important. You did your research, the library. Yes.
Absolutely. Here's the thing. There was only one other book written on the Kingdom of the Happy Land people, and it was by a local historian. Her name was Sadie Patton Smathers. In the 1950s, she was able to interview descendants of the Kingdom of the Happy Land people, and she wrote a book about it. And the only place you can find that book, which is titled The Kingdom of the Happy Land, is at the Hendersonville Library. And so I was able to go there. I was able to, they actually sent me copies of it, because I'm saying a book, but it's about 16 pages, but those were hefty pages, because she had a lot of information in there. From the interviews that she was able to do, there were some pictures of the site and things like that. And there was one other book that was, I say the only book, but there was one other book that had mention of them, and it was a book on Hendersonville. And that was also in the Hendersonville Library.
Okay. All right. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is you have to create some of these people, because due to the passage of time, being lost in history, we didn't know how exactly they were. How were you able to create Louella, William, and the other characters in the story?
Well, first, because they are very real people who walked on this earth, who lived, moved, they had dreams, they had, visions of their own. I wanted to honor them. And so I very carefully, as I researched who they were, and I wanted to basically write them in the manner of what was spoken of them, by their descendants. And so Louella, I write her as, a very bold figure, because that's what was said about her, and that she was a very dominant figure in the building of the Happy Land. And so as far as the real people, I had to be careful. And I did not want to displace the history just because I'm a fiction writer. So there were a few things that occurred within their story that, as a fiction writer, I would have changed, because I would have wanted it to turn out a different way. But that was their story. It was their life. So as you're reading it, these are the things that, this is the way their journey went, and this is there's more information on them as far as once they're in the Kingdom of the Happy Land. So I'm detailing that, and I'm writing the story, and it was very interesting, the information that I was finding. So I didn't really, fact, sometimes it's stranger than fiction.
Right.
so yeah, it was pretty good to write about them. Now, there were a few characters that I included in the story just for the building of the story, because you have to have them speaking with people, but it's all in basically their history, to build their history.
Okay, great. So I know, like Louella, she experienced a lot, even though she lived a life, she experienced a lot of disappointments in her life. I mean, and there was one, as we get further into the book, was very, very soul-crushing, that she really doubted her faith. How do you think those disappointments shaped her?
Just the way they shape any of us. I think as we go through life, sometimes, we have disappointments, and we have to really deal with those. I say for me, it was when my mother passed. That was one of the hardest things I had to deal with, and I was in my 40s, and it shook me. And I remember I never thought there would be anything that would stop me from raising my hands and praising God, when I went into to the church, because that's just what I did, and I love God. And after my mother's funeral, I went into church, the praise music started, everybody's standing up and they're praising, and I couldn't raise my hands. I sat down and I boo-hooed. And so I think it is those experiences that we have as we live this life that, especially as a writer, it helps me to have compassion for when I see other people have to deal with certain things like that, because I went through it. And I know that there's a journey that we go on. And I remember I just had to be honest with God, and I prayed, and I'm like, I knew I still loved God. I was like, but I can't praise you right now. And so I actually had to stop going into the sanctuary because I was embarrassed. It was week after week. I would go in there and just cry. And so I was like, I'm not coming back in here until I can actually praise you. And I was on Wednesday nights, I taught Bible study for our youth on Wednesday. So I could go in there on Wednesday nights, teach the Bible study. I'm like, okay, I got to do what I'm doing this. But I'm like, but Lord, that's too hard going in there. And so it was finally the next time I went in there, because I just kept praying. I didn't even think about it. Praise music started, and I raised my hands, and I just started praising God. But I think that's how life is, and that's how it was also with Louella. And so when I saw the things that she went through, I could understand them because of the things that I had already been through. And so I wanted to write her where people would understand, we don't always stand up at the moments we're supposed to stand up, because sometimes it's just too hard. But we get there. And so it's just like the Bible says, the race is not given to the swift, neither to the strong, but to he or she that endureth until the end.
So let's go ahead and talk about the other characters. And you're speaking about unshakable faith, William, her husband. But there were times Louella was like, nah, I don't know. And it was like, we got to keep on going. Yes, we got to keep on going. Because he's a minister.
I loved William. Loved.
And I hated Robert.
Oh, yes.
We're going to get to Robert. We're going to get to Robert next.
They hate Robert. But I'm telling you, that's where the research went with him. So I was like, oh, here's my villain. so I was like, okay. Every story needs a villain. Yeah. And so there was Robert. I couldn't believe some of the stuff that I found, and I was like, wow, okay. But I also wanted to explain him. I wanted people to understand him. So there's a moment in the novel when I have him speak, and it's real quick, because I do believe when people make mistakes, or when they do things that we see as wrong, there's reasons for that, and there's a hurt that's in them, and that we can't see that hurt. They feel it, and so I wanted him to be able to speak that, because I was hoping that would help people to have a little bit of a soft spot for him, but so far people are just like, nah, I don't like him.
I did get a little bit of a soft spot for him, and it kind of it was like, okay, now that kind of it makes a little bit of sense, but let's bring it back to William.
The nice one.
Yes. It's like literally like they were polar opposites of each other, William and Robert. So let's go back to William. The husband, yes. The king of the kingdom of the happy land.
Yes, the king.
And he ruled like a king, made sure everybody was okay. He made, and when, like I said, when Louella was down, he was the one who picked her back up and said, you can keep going. And at first, Louella, probably because, he was older than her, she wasn't really feeling him like that, but it was like, no, you need to marry him. He's a good man.
And he was.
Yeah. And he treated her like the queen that she is. So yes. So another character is Mama Sue, her grandmother. Yes. Yeah. So can you tell us about Mama Sue?
Mama Sue was, just that perfect type of character that Louella needed to balance her out, because Louella was, just really in your face when something wasn't the way she thought it should be. And so Mama Sue had to be the one that, but Mama Sue was kind of in your face too, though, at times.
Yeah.
So she got it, honestly. Mm-hmm. But Mama Sue was, because slavery was all she knew. And so she was the one she was scared for Louella, because Louella just, dreamed so big. And that just, Mama Sue never imagined that. And so, but I loved Mama Sue. I really did. And a lot of my readers have mentioned that, I've had someone even tell me that she was their favorite, which, shocked me, because I'm like, Louella is my favorite. I'm sorry, bar none in this book, Louella is the favorite. But yeah, Mama Sue she was good.
Yeah.
She was she wasn't close second, but she was second. William second, then Mama Sue.
Yeah. The two ride or dies, Abigail and Emmy, who went throughout the whole journey of the Happy Land. Were they real people, or they were ones you made up and got in so they could so Louella and William can interact with them?
Those two were people that I put in the story to tell the story of the time period of what was going on. There are several names in there. I did not want, because I allowed them to interact a lot, I did not want to use the actual people, but there are several names in there that you'll see that are in the Happy Land. Those are the real people who are there, but they have families and things like that. So I did not want to put things on them that I did not know, because they mentioned these people are in the Happy Land. Like, if I know their occupation from the research, then I'll say what they did. But I didn't want to put more on them because these are real people, and I wanted to respect that. So I brought in, like characters that I could then build the story around, while I still allowed you to hear the real names of the people who walked on that land. Okay. If that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
Yes. Reverend Easel, who
a real person.
He didn't live in the Kingdom of Happy Land,
Correct.
but he was a frequent visitor. And it looks like every time he came around, he brought more people to come to, like, here. I found some more people to live in the kingdom.
He did. And there was actually a family that he brought to the Kingdom of the Happy Land who named their son after him. So there's a picture of an easel couch who lived on the Happy Land, and I was able to find that picture, but that is not the Reverend Easel Couch. It is the family that, they loved this Reverend so much that they named their son after him. He traveled throughout South Carolina during this time, and he would go around preaching. And if you know about this time period, there were people who were adrift, because you've been emancipated, but there's no rule book, there's no real help out there for you. So there were people who were living outside trying to figure it out. And so he would bring them, he would say, I know of a place for you. Because that's what William and Louella wanted. They wanted people to live on their land and to have dignity. And so they would come, after he preached, he would come back to the Happy Land with another family. And so I show that happening in the book, because that actually did happen. When they leave Mississippi with about 50 people. As they're traveling through Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, they end up with about 200 people when they reach the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina. But their whole land has over 400 people in it by the time it dissolves. So, and how many of those people get there is through Easel Couch, Reverend Easel Couch.
Yeah. Okay. And I know Septra and Sarah were real people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you wanted to introduce them as a way to show that at that time, not all white people were nasty and mean and like, cause you had some very extreme examples of meanness, what they went through, like the like William's father and his stepmother and stuff like that. But then you have Septa and Sarah who were willing to embrace them and help them build this kingdom of happy land.
To tell you how much I admired Sarepta Davis after researching her, I went and I visited her gravesite. As I researched this, and as you'll read the story, I think anybody reading it can tell how much admiration I have for Sarepta Davis because of how I write her. Because here's what you have to imagine what's going on. William and Louella, they come to Sarepta Davis. You know, they make arrangements for, you know, that some of their people are working her land to help, you know, build it back up because it's in ruins. But then they want to buy land themselves. But because the Ku Klux Klan is very dominant at this time period, they buy land, they start knocking down the trees and building homes. But they buy this land probably around anywhere between 68, 69, but they don't put the deed in the deeds office until 1882. And that is when things start to tamper down with the Ku Klux Klan. You can look at the time period. They started to finally arrest them and things like that. And so what I got from that was that they didn't want people to know that they own this land when it was, you know, so much violence going on. And so Sarepta Davis could have said, oh no, you don't own this land. I didn't sell this to you. Because now they've knocked all the trees down. They did all the work for them. And she doesn't, so that right there made me admire her as just a human being, because she didn't try to cheat them out of all of the work, because I imagine how hard that was to knock all those trees down, to sit there and build all of those cabins, because they built them from the trees, and that was a lot of work. But now there's homes on this land, and this land is now, you know, someone could have easily said, you know, her children could have tried to say, oh, we're going to just go try and take this land back, because they never put the deed in until 1882. So that's why I wrote her the way I did, because, and also the fact of, I'm sure you could tell that I like Sarah, her daughter, the way I wrote her in the story, because she's the one who goes and signs off on it. They could have tried to fight against it and not do that. And so yeah, I wanted to show that there was goodness in the world, and it comes in all colors.
Faith is shown throughout this book, you know, even with Louella, especially with William, even, you know, that was some faith to walk all the way from Mississippi to South Carolina, North Carolina. That took some serious faith. And then going through, you know, the struggles that they went through, you know, coming out from slavery, going into the unknown of emancipation. How were you able to convey that?
Well, here's the thing, too. That took faith to do that, but I also, in the research, it is believed that William and Robert once lived in South Carolina. And so this is why they knew about the Appalachian Mountains over in that area. And the proof that they did once live in South Carolina is Robert's oldest daughter, Elmira. There is documentation on the fact that he has his daughter, and the fact that they come back to, I'm going to say the name wrong, Inari. I just said it right. Inari, South Carolina. And she's living in Inari. She's 19 years old. And so they take her to the Happy Land at this time. And so there's so it is believed that they lived in South Carolina around 19 years before they come back. And Elmira is the proof on that. And then there's, excuse me, I just lost the thought.
That's okay.
But she is one of the reasons why I can say that they did live there. And if you understand the time period of from her, at her age, what was going on, there were a lot of slave owners leaving South Carolina and going to Mississippi to get in on the cotton boom. So they would have, so at that time period, that's what they were, there was like this great migration over to Mississippi because cotton was good business for them.
Oh, wow. This book is also a love story between Louella and William.
I thought so.
How were you able to write about love during such a difficult time in America's history?
Well, because I think love still existed. You know, no matter what is going on, you still have love. You know, that's the thing that, you know, that still moves us. You know, we get up, you know, we look over and there's this person, you know, and so, but with Louella, what I wanted to show, because of the hardship she had endured, she had a hard time with this idea of love. Because to her, love meant also loss, and she didn't want to lose. But she had to come to understand that it was better to love and to have lost than, as they say, than to have never loved at all. And so that's where I had to leave Louella and her character.
Okay. The dream of the kingdom of the Happy Land was passed along from William and Robert from their mother, who, you know, she's, you know, not in the book, but they told her, but she remembers when she lived in Africa and talked about, you know, all for one and one for all, and that people took care of each other. Do you think that dream was realized? Why or why not?
I do. I think it was realized for a time period, because what they did was, so in this kingdom, it would be considered more of a socialistic society, because all for one, one for all meant to them, everybody went out to work, and all of the people that were in the kingdom brought their money back to the king. And so then he then had the money to buy the land. He had the money to build the homes. They built a church. They had a school, a whole community. And then what was left over, he would evenly distribute amongst the people so that all would have. So that takes a lot of trust to, you know, we in America, we're just not getting ready to hand over all of our money. We get mad, you know, when it's tax time. You know, and they want, you know, all what they want. So can you imagine giving everything? And then, you know, but what you get back is you get a home, you know, you get something to call your own. You get this whole community, which was like a family. And so I think it was realized for them because what they wanted was for people to be able to hold their heads up. What do you think in reading the story?
I think so, and I also like how you reflected that the women were as equal as men, because there were some of the men who were like, oh, the women shouldn't get any money because they didn't.
The men were cutting the trees down.
Yeah,
the
women,
but the back-breaking work.
Yeah, and they're not out there, you know, selling the crops and going up to Greenville or Spartanburg to sell these crops. but the women were out there taking care of the children. They were teaching the children. They were selling the Happy Land ointment, the help with people's arthritis and made some money from that. They were carrying around town, so the woman did contribute to, yeah.
You read this book.
Yes, I did.
That's right.
So they were doing, so I really appreciate that. And they were also a part of the book when things start to change, where some of the men start to think that Louella wasn't a leader.
Well, but doesn't that happens everywhere? But we'll give away a part of the story.
Yeah, that's why I tried to talk about it.
We can't talk about that. we have to just let them read the story.
My last question is, what do you hope readers take away from this book?
I've been saying, because Louella was a dreamer, a visionary. My hope is that, sometimes I think, we get, to a certain age in life and we think, we have to stop dreaming. I hope they take away, to keep dreaming, even, like I say, they had this land for 30 years. So it came to an end, but I don't think the bad part is that it came to an end, but that it existed. That's the beauty right there. So if we don't dream and if we don't try, if we don't get out there and do, I think, we miss a lot, in society. So that's what I hope that readers take from it. Now, what did you take from it? Now, that's the hard question. Don't worry about it.
I think I took away from it that us as a people, we're gonna make a way out of no way. I mean, emancipation literally, came, and these people built a whole community, walked from Mississippi all the way to the South Carolina, North Carolina border.
It took over a year. And I looked at that because of the time period. They say they left, and then when they actually arrived, I was like, wow.
Yeah.
And imagine the hardship.
Yes.
Yeah.
That they dealt with on the road. And I don't even know. Well, I do know. I'm sure I was not able to express the hardship as much as they actually went through. You know what I mean? Because we can't imagine it in our comfortable little homes. We're sitting, with a roof over our head. But I'm trying to think about this, and I'm going, so I tried to write it and try to give the reader some sense of appreciation for the hardship of taking a journey like that. But I still don't think,
Right.
because to me, you still really had to be there.
Yeah.
To really imagine, to really understand the true hardship of that time period.
And then it was also about, I know there's an ending you have to create, and where loved ones that you're afraid you may never see again. And even though with that, we're still thriving, we're still living, we're still creating our own environments, despite all of this, despite all the hardships, and we still made it. I really think that's one of the things that I really took away from this book, and that women have more power than people let on. That men think we have, women do, what run this world, like James Brown says, it's a man's world, but it's nothing without a woman.
That's right. It's a man's world, but women rule it.
Yes.
We just let them, think they running it.
Yeah.
But we rule it.
Yeah. So, okay.
Sorry. I'm just messing with you.
It checks out.
All right. So now we're going to take some questions from the audience.
Hold on, I was going to ask a question.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yes, sir.
I'm allowed
Okay. Yes, you are allowed to.
No, I just want to say I'm a documentary filmmaker. And I
Okay.
do make documentaries a lot on these untold stories. So it's not really a question. I just want to say thank you for stepping out of fiction and writing in historical fiction or writing
Yes.
on truth, because one of the misconceptions that people have is that they do not realize how many of these communities were built. And it also helps to dispel the myth that I have to say quite often to folks, that slaves were not unskilled and they were not uneducated,
Correct.
because they built so many communities that were later taken down or destroyed through Jim Crow because of that wisdom and that knowledge and those skills that they had. So thank you for that book, and I hope you continue to discover those, I don't say lost stories, they just weren't documented because we were ignored, and to the people who controlled the media of the day, we didn't exist, we were
Right.
invisible.
Well, and I would say a lot of times, you know, they wanted it that way too, because they wanted to be able to live in peace at that time. You know, it's like, okay, let's just, I mean, because what they were doing was some great things. You know, you're sitting here building, I mean, a whole community. And you're right, as I was researching them, I found some other ones, but I was like, but none of them called themselves king and queen, so I'm worried about the king and the queen. But
Kind of feeding off of that, I am a huge historical fiction reader. It's like my favorite genre. And I feel like there is kind of this hole in historical fiction about emancipation. Like a lot of people have read historical fiction on what it was like on the plantation. And I think historical fiction is a really good way for people to begin to wrap their head around these little, you know, well, these huge moments in history. But what I found is there isn't much on that time period. A lot of people kind of think slavery ended, everything was fine.
Right,
So
right.
I think that it is important that you are writing a story like this.
And it's
Absolutely.
and it's important for promoting young people of color to write these stories. Because as a documentarian working with white folk, oftentimes they will, before I started producing on my own, they would see a situation, an event, and completely miss the real story, completely miss the love or whatever. Because oftentimes you have this unconscious bias and you're only looking at one particular frame of reference. And so, yeah, that's why it's very important. I think you probably saw things that most people wouldn't see.
Absolutely. Well, because it's not their experience. And so I do think that, you know, it's different when, you know, you're working on something and I'm researching it and I'm feeling this because I'm thinking about my great, you know, grandmother, great grandfather, and I'm imagining, you know, what they, you know, we didn't know to appreciate them for what they, you know, came out of. We're just thinking, oh, you know, we're all just here. And, you know, I didn't live during that time period. So to research it gives me such a better understanding of it. You know, there are people now that will say, oh, they're tired of these struggle books. But I say, you know what? It's the struggle that got you over, that brought you to the point where you can say, you're tired of the struggle books. I don't understand that. I just don't, but bless their soul.
Now, I was just gonna ditto some things and say, I could really appreciate how you were able to find like just some real people who walked the place, and then you're able to make these even though I haven't fully read it yet, but you're able to add to it the realistic characters, you know, by compositing characters and things like that in order to fully fill the story. That's amazing.
Yes, and that's what I wanted to do, because as I said, I didn't want to dishonor someone who, you know, lived, moved on that in that space by saying something about them that wasn't true.
Right.
You know, because like I said, they actually, I mean, I'm putting their real name in the book. Their family may see it one day. Yeah. So I don't want them to say, well, grandfather didn't do that, or, now, William, Louella, and Robert, they're off limits. I could say what I want because I did the research on them, and so, but the other ones who were, if all I was able to find was this certain person also lived on the Kingdom of the Happy Land, and there's like in the story, and you guys haven't got to it yet, but there's a person that I tell you who purchases part of the land. That's his real name, and that is what he really did do. And so, but you'll notice throughout the story, his name is probably mentioned, like he's here, but I don't dig deeper into him because that's all I was able to find is that was something very important that he did for this land. So I wanted him to be in there, but I didn't want to then say more on him than I could verify, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think you have to honor people and give them their piece and not, exploit them.
Sure. That would be hard. You have a lot to think about.
Yeah, but you just bring in fictional people and exploit them.
Well, one of my first, just kind of a tangential reminder was, when I saw the summary of the story, it reminded me of Barracoon by Laura Neale Hurston, and he was the last person to be one of the last group of members who were purchased from Africa, and he was in. They actually ended up having a town in Florida, and I think it was called Negro Land or something like that. And,
yes.
Yeah, I think it was called Negro Land. And then it's still there to some extent, but not it. Just like the Happy Land, it was disseminated in some way or the other. I don't know exactly how, but some remnants of it is there.
When did the book come out? When did you start author talks on the book? What other venues other than maybe the library here and things of that nature?
The book came out. It's new. It just came out January 30th. And so I've been to bookstores. I'll be at Turning Page Bookstore tomorrow. I've been to several. I've been trying to go. I went to Greenville because there were descendants there. And so M. Judson Bookstore. And so I'm going to be in Spartanburg next month and at Hub City.
Yeah.
And so we're doing something. So I'm trying to go to the cities where the descendants, when they left the Happy Land, those were the places they moved to. And so I'm hitting all of those places, and I'm going to be at the Hendersonville Library next month as well. I was supposed to be there the second week, but my brother ended up going into the hospital, a whole nother story, so I had to kind of work some things out. But yeah, I'm doing a lot of things. Bookstores, libraries, I'm doing like book fairs where I'll be speaking about the American Queen. I'd love to also go into colleges and speak about this, and so we haven't put that together yet, and so that's one of the things I plan to put together as well. But February, March, and April is bookstores and libraries like that, and then I want to go into different colleges. So I'm trying to be everywhere I can and to talk about this amazing story, because I really do believe it is an amazing story.
Maybe you'll wind up back at Essence this year.
I would love that. I'm hoping. I know I'm going to be a featured speaker at the National Book Club Conference in Atlanta this year.
Yeah.
And then I was just invited to the, there's another one in Texas, so I'll be there. And so I would definitely love to be at Essence again this year, and so hopefully I will be invited back. And so hopefully, and so, but that hasn't been determined yet.
Okay. And I know you also have your own book Festival,
Yeah.
not festival, but book retreat, you call it.
Yes, and of course I'm going to be speaking about the American Queen at the Christian Book Lovers Retreat, and that is in October. This year it's October the 3rd through the 6th, and we hold it in Charlotte, North Carolina, each year. So yeah, wherever I can go, I plan to be out speaking about the American Queen, because what's important is that not just that I'm speaking about it, but that if you love the book, after you read it, that you tell people about it, that you go and review the book. If people know that people love this book and they love the history that's in it, it makes other people want to get a copy of it. And so that helps to spread the word about, I mean, this was, a time in history where who would have thought that, this man would decide to call himself king and make his wife queen. I love the story because I thought the audacity of them at a time like this, right after emancipation, where you're just leaving enslavement, and then you say, this is our land, and I'm just gonna be the king. I loved it. I was like, okay, William, I see you. And I love this story, and I hope you guys love it as well. And if you do, tell somebody about it. Tell them to pick up a copy of The American Queen, and that will help get the word out.
Any other? Oh, you have one. Okay.
Is there a historical marker for the happy place?
In as I was telling them earlier, there is a street sign that says Kingdom Drive over by where the Kingdom of the Happy Land used to be. Now, also, if you're driving up there, it's about 20 miles outside of Hendersonville. There is you can miss it, and I have a picture of it. I won't find it now. It's in my phone. I think if you, that's what I was going to say. I'm sure it's on my Facebook page. But there's a little marker because the people who own it now, they still call it like the Kingdom of the Happy Land. So you'll see they have a little sign out, which if you're driving too fast, and we passed it, and we had to back up. We were like, wait a minute, wasn't that? And it's only because we had the address. But over in that area, it kind of took us in circles to find it, because then you have to drive. And I was so glad as I tell the story, they had wagons at that time. So I'm talking about them leaving the Happy Land in their wagon and going down, and like at the bottom, they have like their sergeant at arms standing guard at the bottom. You really do, when you drive in, it's like a one lane. So you can't drive in while somebody else is driving the other way. And so I was hoping, I'm like, I hope nobody's trying to get out while because it's a long way of driving in, and then trees on this side, trees on that side. I mean, just tons of trees, and then it opens up. And if you go to my website, when Essence magazine did the article, the picture they have of me holding the book, I'm standing on the land of the Happy Land. And so there's a slide that's scrolling on the different articles that was done on American Queen, and the one that says Essence, if you click on it, you can see like, here's the land, and behind me there's all these trees that they didn't knock down. And I tell that in the story that there were still trees left, but they knocked down a lot. And so this land was so vast that like I say, he drove me and Nicole went with me, and she was like my photographer there, because she does photography, and so I was so happy that she was able to go with me. But so he drives us over on one part of the land, and he says, right here is South Carolina, because they own land that was part North and part South Carolina. Now he says when, you know, like the tax man would come, they would go and stand on the South Carolina side. That was his story. I didn't find that in any of my research.
Because you had it in the book, like Louella lived on the South Carolina and William and Robert lived on the North Carolina side. So is most of it in South Carolina or North Carolina?
They own more land on North Carolina side,
Okay.
and but they owned a lot on South Carolina side as well. But that's how their homes were. On this line, Robert was here, and on the South Carolina side, Louella's home was here. But they were next to each other, but separated by two states, basically. Just a little while ago, because they're actually thinking about selling the land. And so,
Sell a book, you can buy Happy Land.
Put up a new sign.
yeah,
Put up a new sign.
yes. So, but if you reach out, I mean, they were very nice, very nice. And like I say, he even constructed a cabin on the land in honor of the Happy Land people.
Thank y'all so much for coming.
Oh, yes.
Thank you. This was great.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Copies of The American Queen can be purchased in the back from Turning Page Bookshop, who is our partner for today's event. Vanessa will be signing copies of the book and greeting to the audience individually. Thanks to Vanessa, Belinda Miller from Turning Page Bookshop, the CCPL Communications team, Alexis Simmons, Roxy Underwood, Natasha Barzillo, and Julian Gooden behind the camera. And my awesome staff here at DART. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Have a great holiday. And we hope to see you back here at DART. Thank you.